Well, look, I'm just going to open up the session and thanks everyone for coming, and a quick acknowledgement of country as well. So we're on Darug land. We acknowledge the people of the Darug the nation, and we've got three speakers here. We've got Rachel McClymont up first in just a minute, and then following that we've got Steffen Herff, who's here at Westmead, and then Dianna, who I can see is online.
Yes, like you were saying, I'm currently at James Cook Uni up in Townsville, doing my Masters of Clinical Psychology. And I just wanted to chat to you today a bit about our research examining focused listening experiences. So, people don't seek mental health support for a range of reasons. One such barrier that often is cited is stigma. So stigma is that perception of being flawed because of a personal or physical characteristic that is often regarded as socially unacceptable. There's two types of stigma that exist: public stigma and self-stigma. While public stigma is of course impactful, self-stigma, the application of negative public attitudes to the self, has equal if not greater impact. A person may decide not to seek help for a mental health issue because of a belief that it would be a sign of weakness or an acknowledgement of failure on their part. To understand the mechanism behind why self-stigma actually has an impact on behaviours, the why-try model was proposed. The why-try effect, in line with modified labelling theory, proposes that people who internalise stereotypes about their mental illness experience a loss of self-esteem and self-efficacy, and a reduction in behaviours in pursuit of life goals. Why try? I'm not good enough. Why try? I couldn't do it anyway. I will note that this is particularly created in regards to mental illness, but it's been applied across a number of contexts. So what we can do with this? What can we do with this? Well, we could try and intervene at that start, combat the stereotypes and the stigma, but that's quite difficult to do. So rather, what we may be able to do is intervene here in that middle section by targeting the mediators like self-efficacy, self-compassion, and self-esteem. Perhaps we can break this link. So how can we do that? How can we break that link? Well, with this particular project, we were interested in considering a focused listening event that has an element of mindfulness. So there's reason to consider music to support mental health, as well as help-seeking behaviour in particular. There's many benefits associated with music listening, but importantly, research has shown that music, particularly focused, intentional, curated music listening, can facilitate engagement and help-seeking. It's associated with hopefulness and improving distress as well. Music has also been used in the service of increasing self-compassion, particularly when used in the practice of mindfulness. Music has been used in a number of ways to do this, but one event has used music in quite a unique way, and that was the topic of our case study. So our case study was on an event called Listen Up. Listen Up is an immersive music mindfulness experience. Participants are encouraged to pay attention on purpose and to use music as an anchor to the present moment. The core stimulus is a curated soundtrack that's listened to in full. It lasts about an hour or so, along with guidance from a psychologist that aids participants in maintaining an awareness of thoughts, emotions, and bodily sensations. So, in our sample, we ran a moderation based on the why-try model to explore the way that self-compassion may buffer the relationship between self-stigma and help-seeking intentions. It was proposed that by focusing on increasing self-compassion, the relationship would be disrupted in such a way, the relationship in that why-try model would be interrupted, and individuals may be more likely to consider seeking some support, even if they held that self-stigma of help-seeking. And our results did demonstrate this. We found that self-compassion moderated the relationship between self-stigma and help-seeking intentions, such that it kind of buffered that effect. We also found that for individuals who experienced greater mindful curiosity, so had that curiosity element of mindfulness during the experience, also buffered that relationship. Taking a step back from their thoughts and observing them with curiosity, when they were able to do that more, that relationship between self-stigma and help-seeking intentions became less pronounced. We've also done As part of our research, we've also done some interviews. So there's a qualitative component to our study. So a number of themes have kind of emerged from those interviews, as you can see them there. But more interesting than a list of themes, I think, are some of the quotes and stories that really exemplify people's experiences of listener. Oh, that's gonna work for me. There we go. So participants spoke about the emotive quality of the music, the way it pulled up memories and thoughts and guided you throughout the experience. Many of the participants said they felt an increase in compassion towards themselves, with one talking about how much grief they felt and were able to give themselves compassion for that grief. Interesting too were the participants' explanations of the ways that the events helped them connect with very, very difficult thoughts and feelings. One that stood out was a young woman who disclosed that she'd experienced a very traumatic event and explained that through this, listening to the music in this very focused way, she was able to connect with those emotions without having to connect with the memories. She felt safer in this sort of experience than she had in more talk-based therapies. Next, people's responses suggest that they believe that for themselves or for others who may be reluctant to seek help, this may open a door for future help seeking. One woman commented on the connection with the organisation, as you can see there. Some participants found that it prompted them to take direct action, to take care of themselves and focus on what is really important. For one, that meant cutting back hours at work. For another, which I don't have up there, it meant calling her family. They'd had a recent significant death in their family and she felt prompted to call them, which, as she explained, is something that she wouldn't normally do. All this is to very briefly demonstrate the role that this event can play for different people and the ways that can impact people both during the experience, but also carrying on from after the experience. So, Cox states that in contexts where we remain silent while listening, we amplify the element of receptivity. We agree to adopt the role of a quiet, attentive listener, and this act of giving up a measure of power offers a kind of affective reward. Our research suggests that focused, mindful music listening may offer a way for people to engage in promoting their own psychological well-being through mindfulness and self-compassion. And it may also offer a non-threatening way to engage in psychological support, combating help-seeking stigma and promoting future help-seeking intentions. Cool. Thank you all very much.
Let me just introduce Steffen, who will be joining us shortly at Marks as a DECRA Fellow. So thank you very much for coming in, Steffen, and the floor is yours.
Well, thanks a lot for the introduction and for organizing. And thanks to everyone for tuning in on this talk on music and imagination. And specifically, the type of imagination we are talking about here is, if I manage to convince my slides, there we go. It's about goal-directed intentional imagination. And that's the sort of imagination you would use in a recreational sense. For example, in role play, you would use it in a, well, let me just log out of Anthony's emails. All right. There we go. And what is happening here? So, just, what is the account doing here? Sure. All right.
Microsoft is guaranteed.
Yeah, there we go. Okay. No more email interruption. It's a sort of imagination you would use in a simulating past and future sense. So, for example, let's say you had an anxiety-inducing event in the past and it didn't quite go the way you wanted to. When you sit down and think about, what could have done differently to impact the outcome, that is directed imagination or future directed imagination. Let's say you have a job interview coming up and you're running through, different scenarios about, how you would react. Again, intentional imagination. But it's also very often used in a therapy context, specifically in sort of evidence-based therapies, say CBT, exposure therapy or imagery rescripting that requires the client to use very in-depth imagination to imagine specific scenarios or intervention in the imaginary space. Unfortunately, it turns out that many individuals struggle with this, and they often struggle with one of two things. And the first one is that some individuals have too much imagination. This translates effectively in invasive thoughts, which are disruptive in day-to-day life, but also during the clinical sessions. On the other end of the spectrum, you have individuals struggling from too little imagination, which is equally as problematic, because if you think about something like exposure therapy and you say imagining a spider crawling up your arm, that only really works if the individual vividly imagines this, and if they just can't do it, then the entire therapy is sort of a little bit in jeopardy. So what we're looking at are subtle means to influence imagined content and vividness. Fortunately for us, music turns out to be a remarkably powerful tool for that, as demonstrated in the wonderful talk just before this. There's a lot of research on this. Unfortunately, we don't really know how that works. So what we're interested in is what are the precise musical features? How can we manipulate music to influence imagination? This is part of a big project. But today what I'm going to talk about is how music actually interacts with other very well-established parameters, starting with something as simple as closing your eyes. So here's the method. It's pretty straightforward. Individuals or participants watch a little video. This is a visual inducer coming from the video game Journey. And I think someone, good game. And basically what's going to happen is you see the figure running up a hill, and then in the far distance you see a landmark, and participants are then tasked to imagine a continuation of the journey towards the landmark, and about 2 minutes time for this. And then at the end it stops, and then they're asked a couple of questions such as how vivid was the imagined journey, can you describe it in detail, and give us some additional parameters of physical properties of your journey, such as how much time passed and how much distance did you travel. And we do this either in silence or we do this with background music. The music would keep going, but at this point the participants would start imagining and closing their eyes. Now in this particular study we have one additional manipulation, and this is that participants do the same task, silence or music, either with their eyes open or exactly the same with their eyes, with eyes closed, or exactly the same with the eyes open, where they would fixate a fixation cross whilst doing the task. And we tested 100 participants, and here's what we found. So in general, here are 2 music conditions, and what we found is that compared to the silence condition, participants report significantly higher imaging vividness during their imagined journeys. But importantly for the present results is this interaction term, whereby we see that closing your eyes substantially increases the perceived vividness during this imagination trial. But most importantly, this effect is significantly exacerbated in the 2 music conditions. On top of that, music not only interacts with closing your eyes in terms of vividness, as shown here, but also we've seen effects about the perceived and reported sentiment using the natural language toolkit analyzing the description of the responses, which, spoiler, is the reason why I asked for the data set from the previous talk. And here's the second one, which is looking at one of the physical parameters of the journey, in the particular case, how much imagined time passed in the imagination of the participants. So conclusion, so we're quite excited about this because this shows that imagination, which is a very important cognitive process involved in a whole plethora of things, but in the past has been a little bit sort of tricky to measure tangibly in empirical designs. We now have a really nice paradigm that we can use to get to the bottom of this. But of course, in also most apt to the conference context is that we show that music on its own, as well as in its interaction with other parameters, can be used to subtly influence imagination, both in terms of vividness and content. And as I mentioned, this is part of a large and ongoing set of studies. So far, we tested 600-ish participants using a whole variety of different musical features and stimuli. This is ongoing for at least the next 3 years. So if you are interested in collaborations, if you're interested in particular populations, stimuli, or musical features, I would be absolutely delighted if you would reach out. And the only thing left at this point is thanking my 2 wonderful co-authors, which is John Prince, who is in the audience, as well as Sophie McConnell, who is currently not in the conference, but still contributed largely to the study. So thanks a lot, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
All right, fantastic. Great, yeah, so hi everyone, my name's Dianna. I just want to apologize if my computer has any issues. It just randomly shut down before, which is fun. And I've also had a bunch of drilling in my building, like just right above my roof, which has been fantastic. So hopefully that doesn't interrupt today. So I'm going to be presenting, this is the final study of my PhD, that music listening is not detrimental for studying in domestic and international university students. So by way of a bit of background, most university students do study with music playing. We found nearly 70%. But whether music is actually detrimental to studying in either domestic or international students kind of is still a bit unclear. I'm sure a lot of people know there's been a lot of research into this area, but there's a lot of different tasks that people are using and lots of different music across the different studies, and it makes it really difficult to understand these relationships. So, there's some evidence that maybe music might be helpful in spatial tasks, but maybe it's less so for reading. Or lyrics could be really impactful, but music or other sounds could also just make no difference at all. So with this vast range of inconsistent research, then it's very difficult for students, I think, to know what they should be doing. Does music impact on actual study tasks that they might do, like reading comprehension? Are there particular types of music that are better or worse? And do individual factors like international student status or culture play a role in this? So I'm just going to give you a quick overview of my procedure before I jump into my hypotheses. So I wanted to build on this idea that music might improve performance on a task by increasing arousal and mood, so from like the Mozart effect. And so with that, I investigated performance on a reading comprehension task used as an indicator of study performance. So I had a 3-condition design, so music listening, background sound, and silence, and you can see my ends on the screen there. And then I had 2 groups as well, so domestic and international students. This is my rough overview of the procedure. So people were randomly assigned to a group, they rated their emotions, then they did the reading task or the study phase. They rated their emotions again, did a multiple choice test on the reading material, did one more emotion rating, and then finished off the experiment with some final demographics questions. So I'm just going to, again, talk about a subset of my hypotheses in the interest of time. So hypothesis 1, participants in the no music condition will perform better on the reading task than those in either of the 2 sound conditions. Hypothesis 2, that participants in the self-selected music group will have a more positive valence or mood and will report higher arousal levels after the study period than the other groups. I was also really interested in exploring the audio features of participant-selected songs, so in that subset of the music participants, to find out exactly what they were listening to while they were studying. So in my final sample, I had 279 participants, again, in these 2 groups and 3 conditions, and most of those were domestic students. And then I assessed reading comprehension score, the repeated emotion ratings, and the songs chosen by participants. I examined that with the Spotify R package to extract the audio features that Spotify gives. So for the first hypothesis, I found that music had no impact on reading comprehension. So you can see in the graph there, so the domestic students scored a little bit better than international students. But in terms of the condition effect, there was no effect of condition on reading comprehension. All of those groups were scoring pretty similarly. In terms of mood, the music group sort of maintained their positivity after the reading task. So again, hopefully you can see in that graph there, music is the green line. Participants in the sound and the silence conditions, they showed decreased positivity after the reading task, whereas those in the music condition did not. Then for arousal, the music and the sound groups this time maintained their energy. So again, hopefully you can see the green line is the music there. Participants in the silence condition felt less energized after they'd read, while those in the music and sound conditions experienced no real change in their energy level there. And then, like I mentioned, I looked at a subset of the participants, so the ones in the music condition. I was able to extract songs for 81 of the 90-odd participants in that group. And I found that the type of music didn't seem to impact participants' score at all. So those numbers there are the correlation for each of the audio features against score. And you can see that, valence and energy, the ones that we would probably think might have a big impact, nothing there. Same with like instrumentalness, that's Spotify's rating of how instrumental a track might be as opposed to filled with lyrics. And yeah, none of those are impacting on participant score at all. So what does this mean then? I think it indicates that music listening really doesn't necessarily have a detrimental impact on reading comprehension like it's sort of been suggested. Listening to music while studying in this situation might actually protect against a decrease in positivity that students might experience while they're studying if they're getting anxious or something like that. And so since we're finding no negative impacts, it supports the idea that if students really want to, they might find it beneficial to listen to music while they study for their exams. And I think that means that students can be a little bit more confident that they won't receive negative impacts from listening to their chosen music, regardless of what it actually might be. So thank you.